All right. I think we still have people joining, so I will try to keep that going in terms of letting folks in as I see them. But let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I just want to say, I don't really know how to say this, but some folks may have seen posted on Facebook this morning that our friend Mustafa Nizam passed away last night. I don't really have much other information than what I've seen on the Facebook posts. So I'm still a little bit in shock, and I don't really know what to say. Mustafa is someone that I've known pretty well since working with him in North County, starting 2016. So this is really sad. So I'm thinking we could do just a quick moment of silence for Mustafa, and yeah, so we'll just give it a minute for that. Thank you. Okay, thanks everyone. I'm going to share my screen real quick. So thanks for being here, everyone. I know there's a lot going on around now. Just our usual agenda, and then we'll get into our presentation. Do we have any new club presidents, or leaders here that want to introduce themselves? Seeing no hands, some important reminders. I'm going to go over this just a little bit more briefly on club chartering, but the new 2023 club chartering form is available online now. Also, it's time to submit nominations for Club of the Year. The vote will be at the January meeting. We typically don't have a December meeting. No, well, okay. What's going on? Oh, there we go. So I see Deborah on here from our CDP Region 18. If you wanted, I know you have some information, so please.
Good morning. I'm going to try to hold it together. He was one of my delegates the past 5 years, and I got to know him. We didn't always agree politically, but we always came back to what was important, and that was electing Democrats. Okay, last Thursday, I had my regional meeting to go over things such as the e-board and ADEMS. I would encourage everyone to attend the e-board that wants to. It is virtual, so it'll be easy. And make sure you also consider joining a caucus or two. I think I belong to about 8 now, and I find it sort of enriches me and makes me better understand our entire party. ADEM elections are beginning to come together January 7th, 8th, 21st, and 22nd. For San Diego, the dates you need to be concerned with are Saturday, the 21st will be AD 76, and Alan Gerarsi is the convener for that. January 22nd will be the ADEMS for, and Linda Slater is the convener for that one. Time and locations are pending, but we'll make sure it gets to everyone. They will need volunteers, so I hope you consider volunteering. And as you probably know, new regions have been drawn. We will be voting on them in at the fall e-board. Sort of interesting where they put Mission Viejo, where I live, and it will be the 71st, 74th, 75th, and 76th. So basically, it goes from Mission Viejo to the Mexican border, which I did try to protest because it seems like such a large region, but it is what it is. And everyone else seems to be just working hard on running for different offices. And I've just been thrilled with what I'm seeing with everyone running. I'm running, in case you guys don't know, in San Diego. I'm running for Mission Viejo City Council. We finally went to district voting. There's been a lot of drama here, but we're hoping to make a dent into the city council. Keep it up, Democrats. I'm proud of all of you.
Thanks so much, Deborah. I don't think I see Michelle or anyone else on, but I know she sent out some information as well. And I forwarded both Deborah's and Michelle's info to the Council of Clubs. For the current Region 20, Michelle Krug is hosting her region meeting on Tuesday, this upcoming Tuesday, the 18th at 7 p.m. We don't have a central committee, which would normally be during that date and time. Here's the Zoom link. And basically some more information, which Deborah already shared. And again, this was forwarded to our Council Clubs group. So, yep. Thank you again, Deborah, for being here.
Can I add just 2 more things I forgot?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, what's different this like 2 years ago where you had to pre-register, we're going to have to do that again, and everyone will get a PIN number that will need to be on the Scantron. No, ballots will be counted in Sacramento. They will not be counted locally. So that's actually going to help speed up the whole process. And there's some other changes, and I'll make sure you get that information. Thank you.
Deborah, I was wondering about this in your email. You said candidates and participants may vote in any assembly district?
Yeah, so because there's Scantron and you have your individual PIN number, let's say you're visiting friends in LA and you know, oh gosh, I forgot to vote. You can go to a ADM election there and drop off your ballot.
Okay, but you would still be voting in your like assigned assembly district, right?
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
got it. That makes sense. Okay, thank
Ask
you
a
so
question?
much. Yeah.
Yeah, so do the ballots have to be turned in at the caucus, or can we mail them in?
You will be able to mail them in. I don't know what the cutoff, but they are allowing mailing in for those who are just not quite comfortable going to a large gathering.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have a question for Deborah? All righty, thanks again. Let's see. Okay, just a reminder, ballots have been mailed out. If you haven't gotten it yet, you will be getting it soon. Everyone is vote by mail now. The voter registration deadline is October 24th. That's the deadline to register online. If someone does need to register or re-register after that date, they can do so in person at the ROV or their vote center or any vote center in the county. And we're almost at election day. Woohoo. So, and then real quick before we get to Doug's presentation, I just want to remind folks about chartering. So the form is up. It is pretty much the same as it always is. It's this Airtable form. Fill it out. Use the correct template for your member list, which is linked here. If you don't use the right template, then party staff will ask you to resubmit. So make sure you do that. And make sure you pay the annual dues for club chartering. And you will upload your rosters and bylaws here. And remember that club presidents or whoever they're appointing to be the associate need to submit the associate member form besides this. Paul, I see your hand raised. Do you have a question?
Yes, Cody, thank you for calling on me. My question was about the phone number that's required, and then it calls for a Google number, or, you know, they give an example of a Google number. I mean, we've been using the personal home phone of our past president.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get out of that and, you know, use a different phone number, but I'm concerned about having somebody's phone number. You know, we're coming up on December when we have our officer elections, and a couple of people that have been our current president and our past president are both running for office. So I'm concerned about having a Google number connected to their phones. So what is your suggestion?
So if the concern is just because you're gonna have officer elections soon, you can always update it throughout the year.
Okay.
So
But I
if you,
noticed our last president is still on your club information on the website, and she hasn't been the president for you know, this year. So
okay,
it's,
so
yeah.
this is the Dumb Club's link tree, and on here you'll see that there's a, well, now it says 22, but this link is for updating throughout the year, officers, bylaws, and meeting details. So generally, you know, folks only charter once a year, but if you need to submit updates to those items during the year, you know, if you have elections or change your Zoom link or whatever, or bylaw updates, you'll want to submit them here. And this is what the party staff uses to update the list on the website.
Great. Well, I'll definitely do that, because that was the only thing holding me back from getting the thing completed. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Bill asked, what form do we need to submit besides the chartering form? So it does say on the chartering page and in the email that party staff sent out, but where is it? Here. So if you go to the link tree under chartering, you have the chartering form. I'll update this. It'll still go to the 2023. I just need to change the number here. But right here, the central committee member form. So generally, club presidents are their associate on central committee. And if that's the case, you just need to submit this and put club president. I'm sorry, not club president. Or yes, hold on, where is it? This, okay. Associate member joining or currently serving for 2020 through 24. So I think that's the one you would choose. This one down here is for club presidents that are designating someone other than themselves as the associate. So if the club president is going to be the associate, you just need to submit this Form 1. If the club president is appointing someone else to be the club's associate, then they will also need to fill out this form themselves with their information to be added to the central committee list. And this is also, I believe, linked on the chartering page as a reminder. See here. Yeah, here you go. So it's on here as well. So you just confirm you understand that they need to submit that. So alrighty, any other questions about that? No. Oh, Paula, I see your hand up. Is that from before or?
Sorry, yes, thank you.
No worries. Okay. All right. With that, I think I'm done here and I'm going to kick it over. Oh, Seth's hand is raised. Yes.
No, I mean, given that there's so few people here today and that officers are maybe changing in the next few months, wouldn't it make more sense to hold off this presentation until the beginning of next year?
The club chartering is due November 15th.
Yeah, I don't mean the chartering, but I mean the rules of order.
Well, they're recorded, so they can review it. I mean, Doug's here and willing to do it now, so that's, you know, I want to respect his and appreciate him doing that. Yeah. So.
But it seems like it would be more helpful to people if we had, you know, more club presidents here because they need this information.
Sure, but I you know, I don't control if people show up or not. So, and I think a lot of clubs actually do their elections in the late spring. So that's still a whiles from now. So I appreciate that. And, you know, if people want to review, I actually, this whole past 2 years have had this linked from Doug on the link tree for folks to review. And it's been on his last one on YouTube, and this one will be on YouTube as well. So, and I'm sure he's always willing to provide that to anyone else who's asked. Paula?
Yeah, I just wanted to say Doug has been gracious in the past and made presentations at our club. So I think it's always you know, it's always an available training. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so with that, I am going to kick it over to Doug to begin his presentation. Thanks, Doug. All right, Doug, you're muted. Should be able to unmute, Doug. Doug, you're muted.
I'm not finding the
The mute button.
mute button that's normally at the
Okay.
bottom. That's weird.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to change.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
what
I'm sorry. It moved to the top, maybe because I'm the presenter. I don't know.
Yep.
Anyway,
Yep.
sorry.
Did-
Anyway, so now I need to go back.
Yeah.
How do I go back on my? How do I?
Maybe you want to cancel share screen and then reopen it.
Okay, so stop share, and I don't think I've ever done a PowerPoint on. Hold on a second here. Okay, share screen. Share. Then maybe I need to, in order to.
Do you want me to see if I can do it on my end?
let me stop sharing. I guess the question is, can I do a partial screen so I can?
Yes, so if you click it to the share screen button,
Okay,
and then there's 3 tabs in the new window that say basic and advanced files. There's a portion of screen under advanced.
oh, under advanced. And then do portion screen
Yes,
and then
but there's-
share.
yeah, okay, there you go.
And then if I go to,
And you can resize the portion that you're sharing.
I guess I guess I'm trying to figure out is how do I advance slides in, let me stop sharing. How do I advance slides in a PowerPoint when on the screen?
Let me, I don't typically use PowerPoint. I use Google Slides, so I'm not sure, but let me try opening what you sent me.
Okay,
Let me do that real quick.
well, actually, is it showing on the screen now?
No.
Okay, and
I'm opening the PowerPoint. Okay. Let me see here. I'm gonna try sharing my screen. Do you see?
I see it.
All right. Do you want me to just
If you want to advance
yeah.
them, that's fine. But let's see if they advance. So if you go to the next slide.
I see a little arrow here. Oh, that's weird. Okay, so I'm just using the arrow key on my computer keyboard.
Okay, that's what I tried doing, but it didn't work. But anyway, but if you can do it for me, and sorry for the delay.
No worries.
And,
And did you still, are you gonna let me know when you want to do the poll?
yes, okay. And so again, to introduce myself, I'm Doug Case. For those of you who don't know me, I am the political affairs director for Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins. And my email address is at the bottom of the screen there, so feel free to contact me. I'm the parliamentarian for the San Diego County Democratic Party. I'm a retired student affairs staff member at San Diego State University, where I taught many students over the years parliamentary procedure, and that's what we're going to be doing today. After today's presentation, you will receive 2 things from Cody. One is the PowerPoint. So if you want to actually use this PowerPoint to make a presentation to your own club or any organization, feel free to do so. You don't need my permission. And I also will be sending a copy of the handout that Cody referenced that's on the was on the link there, called Understanding Parliamentary Procedure. It's about a 12-page handout, and probably everything that I'm going to be going over today, you'll be able to find in the handout. So don't feel like you have a need to take notes. And the handout is really good. I use it all the time. It has a really neat chart on the back that goes over the key motions and which require seconds and which are debatable, and whether they require a majority vote or 2/3 vote. And so it's a really handy chart to have at your fingertips if you are presiding at a meeting. And so I encourage you to use that. I might mention that the presentation is based upon Robert's Rules of Order newly revised, which is the parliamentary authority that most organizations use. The current version is the 12th edition, and you can purchase that on Amazon or probably any bookstore. You can get the hard copy for, I think it's like $27, the paperback copy for like $16. And I also included in the handout some other resources that you can use. The parliamentary procedure, the book itself is like 700 pages and it's fairly technical. And so sometimes some of the more simple guides may be sufficient for your use. And the nice thing about the The new edition, which came out 2 years ago, is they have a much easier numbering system. So it makes it much easier when somebody asks a question to go to the index and see where it is in the book and be able to go immediately to the paragraph that hopefully has the answer to your question. But before we start, when I do this presentation, I like to do a pre-test to get a sense of how much people know about parliamentary procedure. And so this is going to be a pop quiz that everybody hopefully will take, and it'll be in the form of a quiz, which Cody will put up on the screen momentarily. It'll be 10 true false questions. And so please take the poll, do your best to try to guess. If you don't know the answer, give your best guess, and I'll give you like 4 minutes to complete the questions.
Right. I am going to launch now. So does everyone see it? Doug, you may not be able to if you're a co-host.
Yeah, I can see it, but I can't answer it.
Okay, yeah. Don't worry, it's anonymous. Still waiting on a few more people, so we'll give it a couple more minutes. For everyone who wants to can participate. Doug, are you seeing responses in real time as well?
Yeah, I am. And it looks like there were 9 participants and everybody's answered their 10 questions. So I think we can go ahead and.
Well, it says at the top 9 of 13 have participated. So I think it goes up as people submit. So I think.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. And we'll just give a couple more minutes in case those last 4 folks want to participate.
Okay. And you and I aren't. So that means that there's really only 11. So maybe 2 more people.
Well, I don't think they're counting us because we can't vote.
Okay.
And it says there's 15 people on the Zoom. So.
Okay. Let's give it like a minute and a half then.
Okay. Plus, I already know the answers because I've taken this twice. You know, during 2020, we had a Zoom. It was called like bar trivia or like whatever thing on Robert's rules, and I won, and that's still one of my proudest moments. I credit you, Doug.
So why don't we go ahead and end the poll?
All right. Last person. 3, 2, 1. All right, end poll.
Okay, and can you put the results up on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so is everybody seeing what I'm seeing? Okay, now it's, this shows the true and false, but it's real easy to score because all 10 questions are false. And so maybe you can look through it. People, first one, the second one, scroll on down. So the first one, 36% got it correct. The second one, 2 out of the 11 got it correct. 3, 7 out of the 11, so they're a little bit better. The fourth one, nobody got that one correct. Fifth one, a little bit better, 7 out of 11. Sixth one, only 1 out of 11. The 7, 6 out of 11, 8, 1 out of 11, and 9, nobody got it correct, and 10, 3 out of 11. I'm not going to go over them one at a time right now. Or were the results shared?
Yeah.
Okay.
Folks, can someone give a thumbs up or put in the chat that confirming they can see the results here? Oh, I did share and then I stopped sharing it, but I think.
Okay, and I'm not going to go over them one by one because my presentation will answer all these questions. And so if you have a question at the end, feel free to ask a question, and don't feel bad because what I chose as the 10 questions or 10 of the most things are most often misunderstood or mistaken by people or myths that people have about parliamentary procedures. I wanted to correct all of the common misconceptions that people have. And so even when I've given this presentation to people that have a lot of experience running meetings and so forth, they don't tend to do much better than you guys did. So don't feel bad. So let's go ahead and put back up the presentation. And
all righty.
Okay, and so I'll go through some of these things quite pretty quickly. Some of the more important ones I'll go through a little bit more slowly. If you have questions, why don't you put them in the chat, and then at the end, if there's something that I can answer as I go along, I'll do that. Otherwise, we can do the questions at the end. I try to make it interactive, and so I may ask some questions, and if you could cooperate with me and raise your hand if you have, using the reaction tab, if you think you know the answer, that would make it easier. But I'm, feel okay about calling on people if nobody responds. And the fact that your camera is not turned on does not exempt you from being called on to answer the question. So you can't put your head down and not get called on. Anyway, so the governing rules of an organization, this is like from the top to the bottom, state and federal law. There aren't a lot of laws that govern Democratic clubs. There are for the Central Committee. There's the election code. Most Democratic clubs are not incorporated, but some organizations you may be involved with are incorporated. Next would be the governing documents of the parent organization. And since each of the clubs is chartered by the San Diego County Democratic Party, the bylaws and the procedures of the party will govern in some cases what the clubs can do. Then you have your own local constitution and bylaws. Then standing rules. And the difference between local constitution and bylaws and standing rules are intended to be a little bit more flexible and can be more quickly and easily amended than bylaws. And so some organizations, for example, may have their endorsement procedures as standing rules or other types of procedures as standing rules, and the bylaws are intended to be things that are more structural and should not be easily changed. Some organizations have their own rules of order, and so most bylaws will say that the Robert's Rules of Order newly revised, the current edition is your parliamentary authority, but you can have additions or exceptions to Robert's Rules of Order. And then finally is precedent or custom. So sometimes there's rules that aren't written down, but are the custom of the organization. Next slide. Okay. And by the way, Robert's Rules of Order were developed by a gentleman who was a General Henry Roberts. That's what it came from. He developed these in the 1800s. He was an engineer in the Army, and he was involved in some local societies after he retired, and found that there was a lot of confusion about procedures and so forth. And there wasn't really anything that, there was the Parliament, parliamentary procedure comes from, Parliament in England, but there wasn't anything that spelled out rules for like regular societies or organizations. And so he kind of created his own. And being an engineer, he liked things orderly, and that's why it's Robert's Rules of Order. And so the purposes are to make sure that the majority rules, but also to protect the rights of the minority, to make sure that things are run in a fair, orderly fashion. And if it's done correctly, it will facilitate and expedite business. Next slide. Okay. Under Robert's Rules, all members are treated equally. The next one is a quorum must be present to transact business. That was one of the questions on the quiz. And so even if you have a quorum present to start a meeting, and if some people leave, once you lose a quorum, you cannot conduct any business. You can make announcements and you can adjourn to the next meeting, but you can't conduct any business once you lose a quorum. Additional principles are to provide for a free and full debate. Only one issue is to be debated at a time, and only one person has the floor at a time. Both of those are intended to make sure that things are done in an orderly fashion. And then the last one says members must be recognized in order to speak. And there's an asterisk there because there are some situations like a point of order where you can interrupt the speaker. Kate, you had a question.
Yes, thanks, Doug. So the quorum must be present to transact business. If nobody has called for quorum check, and then somebody calls for quorum check and we realize that we've lost quorum, does that mean that anything before the quorum check was okay? Or if we've lost quorum, we have to go back and figure out when we lost quorum and then negate the things we previously done?
No, it would just be after the quorum check, but it is the duty of the presiding officer to make sure there is a quorum. And so if it's obvious that a quorum is left, it's the duty of the officer to realize that. And then Seth, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, it says free and full debate. So the question is about full debate. What full means there, because it seems like you get only 3 people per side or something like that, but that doesn't seem full.
Okay, I'll explain that later. And so actually maybe it's best if people kind of hold their questions, because a lot of the questions may get answered in future slides, and then maybe make a note of it, and then we can answer the questions at the end that aren't answered.
Okay.
Okay, next slide. Okay, more principles are that people know exactly what they're supposed to be debating by it being clearly stated. Personal remarks are out of order, so you can't attack individuals. You can attack their ideas, but you can't attack them. Most issues are decided by a majority vote, but there are some things that require a 2/3 vote, and those are usually things that restrict individuals' rights. And so if you're going to make a motion to limit debate, and so forth. That would be an example of something where it would require a 2/3 vote, and also suspending your bylaws. I'm sorry, suspending your rules, amending your bylaws, and disciplining members are other examples of things that under Robert's rules require a 2/3 vote. So unless it specifically says it requires a 2/3 vote, it only requires a majority. A silence gives consent. Basically what that means is that abstentions don't count. And so when you're looking at abstentions, it basically means that you choose not to participate. And then the role of the chair is to be impartial. And so the chair should not be trying, the chair's duty is to make sure the meeting is run fairly and not interjecting his or her opinion into the discussion. Next slide. Okay. Typical order of business. So some of these are optional. Obviously, the call to order. Some organizations have an opening exercise like Pledge of Allegiance. Many organizations have programs, and where in the agenda that is usually determined either by custom or by their own rules of order. But usually it's at the beginning of the program or at the end of the program or after the business, kind of depending upon the nature of the organization and the availability of the speaker. Many organizations have a roll call, or at least the chair has to determine that a quorum is present before you can conduct business. Robert's rules doesn't require you to adopt an agenda, but most organizations have that as a policy. And for organizations that are public organizations in California, there are certain rules known as the Brown Act that govern agendas. The Democratic clubs are not subject to the Brown Act. Approval of the minutes of the previous meeting and the reports of officers. And I also might mention that included in the order of business, some Democratic clubs in the Central Committee also allow for a public comment. And that usually is at the beginning of the meeting. And that's something that the Brown Act requires, but isn't required of Democratic clubs or volunteer organizations, but that could be another thing that could be in your order of business. Next slide. Then you have reports of your standing committees, special committees, special orders or things that are put on the agenda from a previous meeting. Unfinished business is not called old business, it's unfinished business. Then new business. Then if you do the program at the end, that's when you would do it. Many organizations have announcements. Some organizations have a good of the order at the end. Some of them do that at the beginning where they recognize, for example, volunteers that have done something extraordinary, et cetera, and then you adjourn. Okay, next slide. They already mentioned the role of the presiding officer is to be impartial, and you can kind of think of the presiding officer as kind of being a traffic cop to make sure that everything is running smoothly. They vote only when their vote affects the outcome and when the vote is by ballot. Okay, so let me explain that. And so it means that you can vote to break a tie if you are voting in the affirmative. Okay, so say it's 10-10 and you are in favor of the motion, then you would vote and you would make it 11-10 and then the motion passes. If you are against the motion and it's 10-10, you do nothing, because if you do not vote, 10-10 is not a majority, and therefore the motion fails. And so you only vote when your vote would make a difference in terms of it being a majority or being 2/3 if it requires that. Additionally, the purpose of that relates to impartiality. Go back a second. It relates to impartiality, and so whenever you are voting by ballot, the chair or presiding officer has the same rights as everybody else, and so impartiality is not an issue when you are voting by ballot. And so whenever you're voting by ballot, the chair should cast their ballot at the same time that everybody else does. As I already mentioned, it is the duty of the chair to make sure a quorum is present, to introduce a business in the proper order, to recognize speakers, because people cannot speak until okay. And I'll get to that at the end. And then determine if a motion is in order. And it is the duty of the chair to determine whether a motion is in order. The parliamentarian is basically an advisor to the body and an advisor to the chair, but the chair is the person who makes rulings. The next slide. To make sure that the discussion is germane to the pending motion. And so sometimes you're voting on it, you're discussing an amendment to not the main motion. And so they're making sure that what people are saying is related to the motion that's on the floor at the time to maintain order, including making sure that you're following Robert's rules to put motions to a vote and announce the vote. And then the next one here is a really important one, and that is to employ unanimous consent when appropriate to expedite business. And a lot of organizations can speed up their meetings by simply doing that. And basically what that means is that if it's pretty clear that everybody agrees, there's no need to vote. And so, for example, say you wanted to approve the minutes instead of calling for those in favor and those opposed, etc. You can simply say, is there any objection to approving the minutes? And then you wait for a brief period of time, like 3 to 5 seconds. And if nobody objects, then you say, seeing no objection, the minutes are approved. And you can do that for people who want to make amendments, anything in which is pretty simple and seems pretty clear that if everybody is in agreement, you can simply say, is there any objection? You don't have to say it 3 times. You only have to say it once. You have to wait, a reasonable time, and maybe 3 to 5 seconds. And then if nobody objects, you say that seeing no objection, then it is approved. And so that's an easy way to expedite meetings. Move on to the next one, please. Okay, steps in handling a motion. Okay, I'm going to ask some questions on this, but you already put the first answer up. And so the first, that's okay, go ahead and put it back up. Okay, and so the first step in making a motion is that you have to be recognized by the chair. And so you raise your hand and the chair calls on you, and then you make the motion. Okay, go ahead and click on the next one. Okay, and the second step, maybe I should have asked, but that's fine. The second step is to second the motion. Most motions require a second. Does anybody want to tell me what the purpose of a second is? You raise your hand if you know what the purpose of a second is. Seeing nobody raising their hand, I'm going to call on Kate to answer that question. Kate, what's the purpose of asking for a second?
To make sure that there's any kind of move to want that thing to happen. Like if there's no second person, then the motion will never pass. So it's kind of pointless to waste time on it, right? Sort
of. I'll give you a half credit for that. The purpose of the second is to make sure there's at least one other person present who wants to discuss it. But it doesn't mean that you agree with it. And so sometimes you hear people say, I will second for the purpose of discussion. Saying for the purpose of discussion is kind of redundant, because that's the reason that you seconded, is to make sure that at least one other person wants it to be discussed. It does not imply that the person who seconds the motion agrees with the motion, and that is why in the minutes you should not put who seconds the motion. Most organizations do that, but Robert's rule says you don't put in the minutes who seconds the motion. Okay, anybody know what the next step is? Raise your hand.
Discussion?
No. Anybody else want to guess? It's one of the most important steps.
The chair repeats the motion.
Thank you. Chair repeats the motion. And so go ahead and put that up. And that is really important for 3 reasons. Number one is sometimes people are making motions and they kind of craft it as they go along, and it's not really clear what they are saying. And so sometimes the chair can restate the motion to make sure that it's really clear and is intended to, and what the chair states, the chair makes sure that that's what the maker of the motion intended. Secondly, it makes it easy for the secretary to make sure that the motion is recorded correctly in the minutes. And then thirdly, it allows everybody to know exactly what they're going to be debating. Because as we said before, one of the principles is to make sure that everything is clearly stated and everybody knows what they should be discussing. And so that's why it's an often forgotten step, and it's a really important step. Then what happens? Sonara, what happens next?
I'm driving, so I'm not, I'm just
Okay.
listening.
Okay. Go ahead,
The-
Kate.
Does the maker of the motion state their reasoning for the debate?
Yes, and so the maker of the motion gets to speak first, and so you can go put that up. And next one, Cody. Okay, the debate begins, and let me go back for a second. And I talked about making a motion. What is the correct way to make a motion? Say we were going to make a motion to buy a banner. Judy, how would you make a motion to buy a banner? What would you say?
I think you would say, I move to find funds to purchase a banner.
Right, exactly. And so the key words there are, you begin by saying, I move that. You don't say I motion that, because in Robert's rules, a motion is a noun. And so I move that, and don't say I would like to make a motion, just go ahead and make the motion. And so the correct terminology is I move that, and then the at should be whatever action you want the organization to take. Okay. And go ahead and put the next one up, Cody. So debate is closed. We'll talk in a second ways to end debate, but generally the way debate is closed when there's no further discussion, when time has expired, or the debate is ended by unanimous consent, or by a 2/3 vote. And we'll go about that in a second. But debate is closed when nobody else has their hand raised. When you've set a time, say you've set 10 minutes for discussion and that time has elapsed. Or when debate is ended by unanimous consent. And so the chair can say, is everybody ready to vote? Is there any objection to voting? And waiting for 2 or 3 seconds, and seeing no objection, you proceed with the vote. And we'll discuss the proper motion for doing this, but you can end debate by somebody making a motion in debate, which requires a 2/3 vote. And then what happens? Who should I call on? Tom, I see you at the top of my screen. So after the debate is ended, what happens?
At that point, you would vote.
No.
No?
What's the next step after the debate is ended? Okay. Anybody? It's similar to the one that we talked about previously. This may be the equally important step.
Review the motion one more time? before vote?
Exactly. And so you want to restate the motion so that everybody knows exactly what it is you're going to be voting on before you vote on it. And you know, that precludes some people getting confused and saying, I'm sorry, I voted the wrong way, because they thought you were voting on the main motion and not the amendment and so forth. And so it's really important. Go ahead to the next slide, Cody, that the chair restate the motion prior to voting on it. So go ahead and click one more time. And then also it's helpful too to make sure that everybody understands what a yes vote is and what a no vote means, because sometimes it can be confusing where you have a motion where you're opposing something. And so if you are opposed, you want to vote yes, and so forth. And so the chair should clarify the motion and indicate what the result of a yes and no vote is, and then go ahead and proceed. Next slide. And then you call for the vote. And then you call for the vote. You only ask for 2 things. You ask for people in the affirmative to say aye, and those in the negative to say nay. You do not ask for abstentions. Abstentions are people who choose not to participate, but you know, they don't really count, and so you don't really ask for abstentions. And I'll go into that just a little bit further, but anyway, you call for the vote, you call for the ayes and the nays, and then you announce the result of the vote, and then go on. And then if somebody wants to challenge it, so say it's a really close vote, and the chair said that the vote passes, but you think that there actually were more people opposed, but the people who were in favor were just louder. You can call for a division. Anybody anybody has the right to ask for a division. A division simply means you're going to have a count. And you normally do that by a raise of hands, or in a large organization, it may be by standing. So you can actually get an exact count. And so those are the steps in handling a motion. Move on, please. Then the rules of debate. And so we talked about in the middle of the heart of the motion is the debate. And as indicated, people must wait to be recognized. And so you can't speak out of turn. You have to wait for your turn and have your hand raised. As we already discussed, you have to be talking about whatever the immediately pending motion is. And so if we're talking about the amendment, you can't talk about the main motion. As we already indicated, the maker of the motion can speak first. They don't get the right to speak last, but they do get the right to speak first. And these next two are really important, and they can speed up meetings that sometimes go on for a long time, is that nobody can speak twice until everybody has had a chance to speak one time. And then nobody can speak more than twice to any motion. And so sometimes you'll find, people that want to respond to everything that's being said. And, the proper procedure is that nobody gets a chance to speak twice until everybody's had an opportunity to speak once, and nobody can speak more than twice to a motion unless you change the rules of debate by a 2/3 vote to allow that. Next slide. Well, the next one is from Robert's Rules of Order, 10 minutes per speaker. In most organizations, 10 minutes is too long, so you may want to have a shorter maximum. Next is you address your remarks to the chair, and no cross debate. Oftentimes in organizations, you'll have two members that debate back and forth, and everything should be addressed to the chair. The maker can't speak against their own motion, but they can vote against their own motion. So if they are convinced that their motion wasn't a good idea, they're not required to vote for it. We already indicated no personal discussion, so you can't comment on the people who are speaking. You can speak about their ideas. And then if the chair really wants to talk about an issue, they think that it's really important to speak, and they need to relinquish the chair so that it's impartial. And the person who assumes the chair would be the highest ranking officer who has not spoken or doesn't wish to speak on the issue. And then when the motion has passed, or maybe not passed, but when the motion is disposed of, then they can reassume the chair. And so they have to wait until the vote has occurred before the presiding officer can take back the chair. Next one. Go back. There you go. The next one is not required by Robert's rules, but it's a good idea. And that is for the chair to alternate between those in favor of the motion and those opposed to the motion. That allows for a more balanced debate. And it also can expedite meetings, because if somebody makes a motion and 10 people raise their hand, and actually all 10 people or 9 of the 10 people are in favor of it, or 9 of the 10 people are opposed to it, sometimes by alternating back and forth, if there's only one speaker in favor or one speaker against, it kind of becomes clear where the group stands. And at that point, the chair may say, it looks like we have a consensus. Are we prepared to vote? And seeing no objection, we'll proceed with the vote. And so it's also a good idea when possible to maintain a speakers list. That keeps people from keeping their hands raised the entire time, which can be distracting. Other rules are that you can't disrupt a meeting, so you have to wait your turn to talk. And any of these rules can be changed by a 2/3 vote. So by a 2/3 vote, you can, for example, allow people to speak 3 times, or you can restrict them to 1 time. You can set a time limit. Any of the rules of debate can be changed by a 2/3 vote. Next slide. Voting, okay. And so a majority vote is simply there are more yeses than nos. A tie vote is not a majority, so a tie vote fails. And so an easy way of doing it is count the number of yeses and the number of nos. You forget about abstentions. You don't even ask for abstentions. And if there's more yeses than nos, then it passes. And likewise, a 2/3 means that there are twice as many yeses as nos. As I indicated, abstentions don't count. And so if there's a motion that has 8 yeses, 6 nos, and 6 abstentions, that motion passes because there are more yeses than nos. Now, with regard to abstentions, sometimes a person will want to have their abstention put in the record. And so say they have a conflict of interest and they want to make it clear that they did not vote, they can make a question of privilege and have it noted in the minutes that they abstained on that motion. And so a person can request that their abstention be recorded, but the chair doesn't normally ask for abstentions. Next slide. Okay, types of voting. Many votes are done by voice vote. That's hard to do on Zoom. But usually in most organizations, you just do it by voice. So all in favor say aye, opposed nay, etc. You can do it by show of hands, and sometimes if it's not clear from the voice vote, the chair will then ask people to raise their hands, or in a large body like a convention, they may do a rising vote where people actually stand up instead of show their hands. You can vote by ballot, and many organizations require ballots for their elections, and sometimes they also require for endorsements. A roll call vote is where the chair calls each person individually and they answer how they voted. That seldom is done, but it can be ordered by a majority vote, so you can make a motion for a roll call vote. And in most organizations, proxy voting means voting for somebody else is not allowed unless the bylaws provide for it, and very few bylaws allow for proxy voting. Next slide. Okay, so then making motions, most things are done by making a motion, which includes bringing business before the body. That can only be one motion at any given time, so you can't have you can have subsidiary motions, but you can only have one main motion on the floor at a time. Next slide. And so next to the main motion, the most common motion is one to amend. And amending the motion does one of two things. Either it adds things or changes things to the main motion, or deletes things from the main motion. Then you see here that it says friendly amendments require unanimous consent. Under Robert's rules, there is no such thing as a friendly amendment. I used to say you don't find the phrase friendly amendment in Robert's rules. The new edition actually does reference it, but it basically explains that friendly amendments don't really exist. And so sometimes a person will make a motion and they said, I'd like to make a friendly amendment. If the friendly amendment is something the chair thinks that everybody will agree to, they can do it by unanimous consent. But they don't ask for the permission of the maker of the motion, and definitely not the seconder of the motion. Is it okay to change it? And so unless there is unanimous consent, you have to vote on it. And then proceed. And then a secondary amendment is sometimes you can make an amendment to an amendment, but you can't make an amendment to an amendment to an amendment. So you can't have a third order because that just becomes too confusing. And you vote on the amendments in order. And so if somebody makes an amendment to an amendment, you vote on that first. And then depending upon whether or not the amendment was changed, you vote on the amendment. And then depending upon whether or not the main motion was changed by the amendment, you vote on the main motion. So you kind of think of it as going up a ladder and down a ladder. Next slide. A substitute motion is basically an amendment of the whole. And so sometimes things get so confusing that it's much easier to simply start over from scratch. And then a substitute motion is done in two parts. The first part is to vote to substitute. And so if you vote to substitute, it means you're doing away with the previous motion and all of the amendments, and you're starting over again. with the new motion on the floor. So it's a two-step. You vote on whether or not you want to substitute and change what is on the floor. And if you do that, then you vote, then you still have to vote on the motion itself. And so substituting is basically an amending, but you're amending the whole thing, and you have to vote to substitute, and then you vote on the substitute motion if that passes. Next. The next things are several things that can be done to refer to a committee, or I'm sorry, things that can be done to a motion. A common one is to refer something to a committee, and you may include instructions. You may indicate, please come back next month with your recommendation here. It may include, who's going to be on the committee. It may include the date to report back and so forth. And so one way of handling a motion is to make a motion to refer. And then if the motion to refer passes, then you're done until the committee comes back. Next one. Sometimes you want to postpone definitely. That often occurs when A, you don't have time to do it at this meeting, or B, you need more information gathered before the body can make an informed decision. And so if you want to vote on it at a later time, you simply vote on the motion to postpone definitely and say, so you would simply, when it was your turn and recognized by the chair, say, I move to postpone consideration of this until the next meeting. And then it comes up under new business. Next one. The next one is the vote to postpone indefinitely, which basically is a way to kill a motion that you don't want to, you don't think needs to be voted on. And so the, okay, I don't quite understand his, I'll go, you want to go and explain your question in the chat? I'm not hearing that, so maybe we'll get it at the end. Anyway, so the motion to postpone indefinitely is basically what you mean. If you don't want to consider the motion and just want to get rid of it, you postpone it indefinitely, and so you end discussion, but you don't bring it back unless at a subsequent meeting somebody wants to make a motion to bring it back. Okay, next one. Next slide. Okay, division of a question. Sometimes you may have a multi-part motion, and people in the organization may think it makes more sense to vote on it item by item. And so you can make a motion to divide it into two separate motions, or even 3 separate motions. Okay, and a motion to divide does require a second, but it's not debatable, and it requires a majority vote. And as I indicated, whether things require a second and are debatable or are included on the handout. Kate has her hand raised.
Thank you. So when we're talking about dividing a question, does that include when there are multiple people like on a slate for endorsement?
Exactly. And so, yeah, so if say there was a motion made to endorse A, B, and C for the school board, and you like A and B, but you have concerns about C, you can make a motion saying, I move that we vote on them individually.
Okay.
Or you can even make a motion if you wanted to, saying, I move that we vote on A and B together, and that we vote on C separately because you think that that would maybe be more controversial. Yes, that's what division is.
Okay, and so that's not, there's no debate for that. It just goes straight to the vote after the second.
Yeah, person seconds it, and then the body decides. There's no debate on whether to divide it, and then the vote.
Oh,
okay, and then
I feel like it's been different than that at central committees. That's really interesting to me.
And it may be because the way the consent item is done at the central committee, and so it's maybe a little bit different than a typical motion. But yeah, if you have one motion and you're going to divide the motion into parts, then it's not debatable until you actually come up until the motion is divided, if that motion passes. Okay, next one.
Thank you.
Withdrawing a motion, once a motion has been stated and debate has begun, it belongs to the body, not to the maker of the motion. But sometimes if, the maker of the motion decides that it wasn't a good idea after all, they can request that it be withdrawn, and that can usually be done by unanimous consent. But if some people still think it's a good idea, then you have to vote on whether or not to withdraw it. Next one. Okay. As I already indicated, I think I talked about this, you can change the rules of debate by a 2/3 vote. And so you can indicate we're going to have, 2 speakers for, 2 speakers against. We're going to limit it to 10 minutes. Or if you've already limited it to 10 minutes and you want to add another 10 minutes, so you can do that as well. But anytime you're changing your rules of debate requires a 2/3 vote. Okay. Previous question is basically a motion to end debate. Technically, under Robert's rules, if you want to end debate, you raise your hand, wait to be recognized, and you say, I move the previous question. I never say that because not everybody knows what the previous question means. And so I simply say, I move to end debate. But if somebody moves the previous question, what they're saying is, I move to end debate. Please note that you can't just shout out, call the question or question. You have to wait to be recognized. And you can't cheat by speaking, debating, and then saying at the end of your speech that I would like to end debate. And so if you want to make a motion to end debate, you have to do that immediately. The motion in debate is not debatable. And as indicated, it requires a 2/3 vote. But again, oftentimes the best thing for the presiding officer to do is say, we have a motion to end debate. Is there any objection to ending debate? And if there's no objection, you can proceed with the vote. That saves time, because otherwise you have to do a show of hands, so you get whether or not there's 2/3 of the people who want to end debate. If you don't get the 2/3, you continue debating until you get a subsequent motion to end debate or nobody else wants to speak. Next one. Okay, reconsider. You can reconsider a motion that has been voted on, but there are some special rules. And so because you've already voted on it, that's why there are special rules. The key one is it has to be made by somebody who voted on the prevailing side. And so if the motion passed, the only person who can make a motion to reconsider it would be somebody who voted yes. And if the motion didn't pass, then the only people who can make a motion to reconsider are the people who voted no. And it does require a second, and it is debatable, at least if the motion to which it applies, it was debatable and requires a majority vote. And so the purpose of this is, if somebody changes their mind, and so if they voted yes, and that there's and they've either misunderstood or there's new information, and they want to have a chance to have a revote and open it up for further discussion, it does that. And so it precludes people who didn't get their way from asking for it to be reconsidered, which is why it requires somebody who voted on the prevailing side to have it reconsidered, so it's not abused. Next slide.
Sorry, Doug, I have a question.
Okay.
Does the second have to be from the prevailing side as well, or just the maker of the motion?
I don't know the answer to that. So I think that I don't think the seconder does. I'll double check that, but I don't think the seconder has to. But I will confirm that. Get back to you. Okay. Good question.
Thank you.
Yes, the motion to reconsider has to be made at the same meeting. Or if you have a convention that is like multiple days, it has to be done in the same session. But the next slide is if you want to essentially reconsider it at a subsequent meeting, which would be to rescind an action you took previously or amend something you did previously. And so if you want to bring something back for further discussion that you already voted on, you can do it at a subsequent meeting. Unless you've already voted on it, unless you've already acted on it. So say you made a motion last month to buy a banner, and you already bought the banner. You can't re-vote on it after you've already taken that action. And the vote that's required to rescind an action previously taken depends upon whether there was notice. If in the notice of the meeting you indicated we're going to rescind or amend something previously adopted, then it only requires a majority vote. Otherwise, it requires the lesser of 2/3 of those voting or a majority of the entire membership. And so that's basically to preclude people from revoting on something because there's a different composition who's present at the meeting. So there are special rules to make it more difficult to rescind something that's been previously adopted. Next one.
Doug, I have a question. So when it says vote required is a lesser of, and then it has those three. So is it saying, for example, that like, if it's not, like, if you don't have a majority of the entire membership in the vote, but you do have 2/3 vote of those present, does that work?
Right. Okay. And so say you have 100 people and in your organization, and in that case, it would be 50 would be a majority of the entire membership, but say that there is only a 30 present and 20 of those vote to rescind or amend, then that's sufficient.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, the next slide. Point of order is basically pretty obvious. If you don't believe that this presiding officer is doing things according to Robert's rules, you can make a point of order, and the chair will either indicate whether or not your point is correct or not. And then if somebody wants to appeal that, they can do that through an appeal. Go to the next slide, which probably is the next slide. Let's see. Yeah. And so an appeal is used to challenge the ruling of the chair. It does require a second. And that requires a majority vote. You vote in the negative to reverse the decision of the chair. So when you vote on the appeal, if you vote yes, then you are affirming the ruling of the chair. If you vote no, then you want to reverse the decision of the chair. And next slide. Call for orders of the day basically means that if you're not following the agenda, you can interrupt and say, I call for the order of the day. Next slide. I'm going to go through these really quickly. Lay on the table. Tabling a motion is one of the more commonly misunderstood motions. Laying on the table is only used for extenuating circumstances when there is an urgent item that comes up. And so say that you are discussing whether to buy a new banner, and you have invited Governor Newsom to come speak to your club because he's in town, and he shows up and you don't want him to wait for the discussion. You can vote to lay something on the table, and that usually is done by unanimous consent, and then you allow them to speak. The point being is when you table something, it's not debatable. And some people try to table something as a way to postpone indefinitely. And so if you want to kill something, the proper motion is to postpone indefinitely, not laying on the table. So the motion on the table is a special motion that you use when you need to divert from your normal order of business because something urgent has come up. And then next slide is that when the governor leaves, you make a motion to take it from the table or go back to where you were before. Next slide. Suspending the rules. Suspending the rules requires a 2/3 vote, but you cannot suspend bylaws unless the bylaws specifically say they can be suspended, and that is a rare occasion. And so you can suspend suspend rules, but not bylaws, which is another reason why you may want to have standing rules that are separate from your bylaws. And next slide. A point of information. A point of information is not an opportunity to share information. A point of information is a question. And so if you have a question about the motion that you need to have answered before, excuse me, before you can determine whether you should vote yes or no, that would be a point of information, and the point of information, can interrupt, but it's not an opportunity to add information. A point of information is a question that the person needs in order to better understand the motion or whatever. Next one. Question of privilege. That's also a motion that can be used to interrupt. A good example that I gave here is that a motion to go into executive session. Executive session is when only the members of the organization are present. So you want to, for example, maybe kick out the press or Republicans or whoever happens to be there. And so if you have something that may be sensitive that you don't want discussed for the general public, you might make a motion to go into executive session. And that is something, that's a motion of privilege. You might also anyway, so that's an example of a question of privilege. Motions of privilege are debatable and require a majority vote. Oftentimes they can be dispensed of by unanimous consent. Other examples are to have a 5-minute recess or whatever. Okay. And then I think we already talked about division of the assembly. Go forward. Okay. Okay, a motion to recess is asking for a recess that does require a second, but it's not debatable. And move forward. And then the most popular motion for long meetings is the motion to adjourn. It does require a second. It's not debatable and requires a majority vote. And so now I'll answer any questions that I didn't get a chance to previously. And hopefully I've answered all of or explained all of the questions that were on the quiz. If not, feel free to ask about that as well.
Sorry, I can't raise my hand, but you don't need a motion to adjourn the meeting if you're finished with the business on the agenda, right?
Yeah, so the chair can simply say they're, seeing no further business. Basically, you're doing it by unanimous consent, and so the chair should say, seeing no further business, unless there's an objection, we will adjourn. So you don't have to vote to adjourn if there's no further business and you've completed your agenda. Okay, looks like Seth has raised her hand.
Yeah, back to that question about full debate. So full debate is subject to whatever rules there are for how many minutes or how many speakers and stuff like that. Yeah,
unless there is a motion to limit debate, debate can go on until everybody has had their chance to talk, talk twice, and that's what full debate is. That everybody's had a chance to, who wishes to speak can speak twice, and if you want to limit full debate, you do that by a 2/3 vote.
But it seems like most of the time it's limited by how many people can speak or something like that. Am I getting that right?
Well, I mean, unless there's a motion to limit debate, everybody has the opportunity to speak twice if they so choose. And so that is how Robert's rules defines full debate, but you can limit that by having a motion or by unanimous consent to restrict it to, beyond that. or even to extend it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, looks like there's a couple other raised hands. I can't see, oh, maybe I need to go back.
Barbara,
Okay,
I have a question on Zoom meetings because we're holding hybrid, so we have people on Zoom and present. When we're on Zoom, the host, whoever's host, and puts forth the ballot, poll, whatever you want to call it, is unable to vote. You're restricted from voting if you're a host or a co-host. How do we pick that up?
okay. The way most organizations do that is that they ask them to vote by voice, or they ask them, what is your vote, a yes or no?
Okay.
And then if it makes a difference, the chair can vote, but normally they vote, they do it by poll, they do it, and then they give an opportunity to ask each of the co-hosts how they choose to vote.
Thank you.
Next question is Kate.
Thank you. So I wanted to kind of ask a follow-up on Seth's question about limiting debate. When we consider endorsements, there's often we basically we use 3 persons can speak for each candidate and then 3 for no endorsement. Is that something we have to vote on each time, or is that something that can be presented when we are presenting the process by which we consider endorsements?
Yeah, frequently what happens is that the chair of the meeting will indicate what the rules of debate are going to be for that particular item. And I guess if you want to be technical, what the chair, unless you have a rule, so you may have a standing rule or a rule of order that indicates that for endorsements, we're going to limit it to 3 for or 3 against. But unless you have a rule or even a custom, then the chair can propose rules of order, and oftentimes they do. And but the best thing to do is say, unless there is an objection, we're going to go with a 3 for, 3 pros and 3 cons, or 3 for, 3 against, and so forth. And so
so we basically, even if it's tradition, then we do have to get it, we have to let the body affirm that.
Well, not necessarily, because as I indicated when I went over the chart of rules, the one at the bottom is precedent or a tradition. And so if the organization has always had a practice of allowing 3 for, 3 against, then they don't have to say without objection. But if there's not an understood rule, the best thing to do is for the chair to propose the rule and say, if there's unless anybody objects, we're going to go with 3 pros and 3 cons. And then and the chair may see that there's a lot of people with their hand raised, and so the chair can also propose to change the rules and say, it looks like there's a lot of interest in this race. I'm going to go with, I propose that we allow 4 yeses and 4 nos. Is there any objection? And so
Okay.
the best way of doing it is by unanimous consent. But if you want to change the rules or create a rule, it requires a 2/3 vote.
Would you recommend that we put in our standing rules, kind of these kind of traditions or whatnot?
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's why and also because they're in standing rules, are easy to change. And so you can vote to suspend your rules by a 2/3 vote, whereas if they were in your bylaws, you can't suspend your bylaws. And so those are the kind of things, exactly the kind of things you want to put into your standing rules.
Thank you.
Looks like William has his hand raised.
First of all, I want to thank you very much. This has been really, really great. A lot of stuff I didn't know. I flunked the quiz. I think you said you were going to send this out to us as a PowerPoint at the beginning. And what I would like to do is get in some form that I can print, so I can just take it to our meetings, because I think it would be very helpful to have this in print form at our meetings, so I can just refer to it right away.
Actually, you're going to get both. Cody is going to send to you this PowerPoint, which you can use to present to others if you so choose. But you also will get the handout. As I indicated, the handout is 12 pages, but everything that is in the PowerPoint is included in the handout, and
Oh,
it has a
great.
really nice chart at the end
Okay.
that you can have at the very back page, indicating whether a particular motion requires a second, whether it requires a 2/3 vote, whether it's debatable, and so forth. And so it's a really handy guide to have at your hand if you are presiding in a meeting.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And any other questions? And so I need to look up the answer to Kate's question. Kate's question was, in a motion to reconsider, does the second also have to be on the prevailing side? And I looked it up and I'll get back to you, Kate.
Thanks, Doug.
And any other questions? I'll I'll entertain a motion to oh, I'm sorry, I forgot something. Go on to the next slide, Cody. Thank you. I just realized that I did have an additional slide, or actually a couple of slides. Sometimes when you are in a small group, like a committee meeting, you can have modified rules of order. And some of the most common differences are that when you're in like a small committee member, and that's defined as 12 members or less, the chair can participate in the discussion. And then sometimes in Robert's rules, you have to have a motion on the floor before you debate it. Sometimes in a committee, the motion kind of flows from the discussion. And so you can debate something or discuss something before you have a motion on the floor. And then in small committees, you don't have to have a second. And in small committees, people can speak, more than twice. And then go on to the next one. Next slide. Okay, anyway, and so those are some of the common rules for committee meetings, and so they don't require as much formality, and so they're intended to be more informal, so people have an opportunity. Chair can participate, you can talk more than twice, and you can don't have to wait until there is a motion on the floor, and the motion doesn't have to be seconded. These are some recommended books, and these are included in the handout. And then also the next slide are some websites, and those websites are also included in the handout. And now the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn this part of the meeting. So thank you for the opportunity of presenting. And if you want me to make a presentation to your club, I'm free to do so. I'm always happy to do that.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks so much, Doug. Really appreciate it. And again, this has been recorded. I will get it up as soon as I can on our YouTube channel. Again, you can go to the Dem Club's link tree to find all the links. I'm going to add these to the slides folder as well, and the handout. Everyone will get access. But yeah, thanks again. Sinara, I think, is the only committee member here today, so I don't think we're gonna have our committee meeting after this, but thanks everyone for being here, and have a good rest of your weekend.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great meeting.
Bye.
Thank you.